Thomas stood at Farquhar, the top station of his branch line. He had run round Annie and Clarabel after the morning journey and was enjoying a short rest before the run back down the valley. His driver and fireman stood beside his cab, talking to the guard, who had brought startling news. "Did you know the station master was burgled last night?" he was asking. Thomas's driver shook his head. "You don't say," he exclaimed. "I didn't know he had anything worth stealing." "He's won cups for gardening," explained the fireman. "All taken, and the scoundrels had the cheek to pinch his car to carry them away in." "Not that new one he's so proud of," said the driver. The guard nodded. At that moment the signal rose to show the line was clear. The driver and fireman climbed into Thomas's cab, the guard blew his whistle, waved his green flag and got into Clarabel, and Thomas set off. By the time they were through the tunnel, the train was running nicely. Road and railway were beside each other here, with only a stream between them. Thomas remembered his race with Bertie the bus. He had only won because he could go through the hill while Bertie had to go over it. A flash of colour on the road ahead caught his eye. He tried to go faster to look more closely. "Steady, Thomas," said his driver. "There's plenty of time." "Can't we get closer to that car?" panted Thomas. "It looks like station masters to me." "Lots of cars look like that," laughed his driver. But he opened the regulator and they began to draw level. There were two men in the car. They waved when they saw Thomas and tried to go faster. "That's the car all right, Thomas," said the fireman, "and those two must be the thieves. But we can't stop them. They'll be gone long before the next station." "We need a pencil, paper and something to put a note in," said the driver. "We'll throw a message out at the next signal box." Quickly he wrote the note, and they put it into the fireman's empty lunch tin. Then, drawing ahead of the car, Thomas whistled to attract the signalman's attention. They slowed so that the fireman could throw the box up to him, and as they went past, both driver and fireman shouted "Police!" at the top of their voices. By now the stolen car had gone well ahead, and Thomas didn't see it again. But the signalman telephoned police headquarters at once, and the thieves were stopped at a roadblock about 10 miles further on. That afternoon, the Fat Controller travelled in Annie to Farquhar. When he got there, he and the station master climbed onto a porter's trolley. They told the passengers the whole story, and the station master thanked Thomas, his driver and his fireman for their prompt actions. The passengers cheered loudly, and they cheered even more when they heard that the station master's gardening cups had all been found undamaged in a sack of the boot of the car. "A long time ago," said the Fat Controller, holding up his hand for silence, "Thomas showed how valuable he is to the smooth running of my railway. I am sure you will all agree that today he has once again proved himself to be a really useful engine." Percy had never known Tom Tipper to be anything but cheerful. Tom was postman at Farquhar, and every morning he would have a cheery word for Percy as he helped to load the mailbags onto the train. Percy then took them to the town where there was a big office for sorting the letters. But one morning, Tom wasn't there. A postman they didn't know just dumped the bags on the platform and bicycled off without stopping to help. "What happened to Tom?" wondered Percy's driver. "And his old van," added the fireman. "No wonder the new chap looks fed up. Carrying mail bags on a bike would make anyone miserable." Tom was soon back, but without his van. During his illness, it had been decided that the van was too expensive to run. Poor Tom was no longer cheerful, and now had no time to help load the train. "I wish I could cheer him up," sighed Percy the small engine. One day, a man came from the station office to tell Tom that some papers needed signing. "Oh dear," he said anxiously. "That's going to make me very late." He asked Percy to keep an eye on his bicycle while he was gone, and propped it up carefully against the fence near the platform ramp. He was gone for a long time, and had not returned when Percy was ready to go. Some boys were playing on the platform, and Percy was worried. "Sorry, Percy," said his driver. "We must be off. Time and the Fat Controller wait for no man." In the flurry of starting, no one noticed that one of the boys had picked up Tom's bicycle. He pedalled too far along the platform, and before he could stop, ran out of control down the ramp. He reached the bottom just as Percy started away. Fortunately, the boy fell clear in time, but the bicycle swerved beneath Percy's wheels and disappeared with a crunch. Percy's driver stopped the train quickly, and they extracted the remains, but the red bicycle was beyond repair. Tom came running, and he, the driver, the station master, and the guard all told the boys what bad boys they were. "I'm sorry, Mr. Tipper," apologised Percy. "Never mind, Percy," said the postman. "It wasn't your fault, and I never liked that bike anyway." When the Fat Controller heard about the accident, he ordered that Tom should be provided with a new bicycle at once. But next morning, when Percy arrived at Farquhar, he saw a brand new red van standing in the yard, beside the ruins of the bicycle. Close by stood Tom Tipper, beaming from ear to ear. "That accident did me a good turn, Percy," he smiled, "and now my chief has decided to let me have a new van after all." "So I did help," said Percy to himself when Tom had gone. "By accident, as you might say." The fishermen who used the port near the big station were bringing in more fish than ever before. Each day the sheds on the quayside were piled high with boxes. Much of this extra fish had to travel by rail, so the trains which Henry and the other engines had to pull became heavier. One night a special load of fish was ordered, and the Fat Controller decided that extra vans must be added to the train the men called the Flying Kipper. The only spare vans they could find were old ones that had been standing unused on a siding for some time. The workmen cleaned them quickly, and they were added to the tail of the train. Henry grumbled dreadfully about it, but there was nothing to be done. "You'll just have to put up with it, Henry," said his driver. "At least the extra load will mean we can have a banker up Gordon's Hill." Duck often waited at Edward Station so that he could help heavy trains by pushing behind. Tonight, Henry made good progress in spite of his extra load. When they reached Edward Station, his driver stopped the train beyond the platform. Then, using Henry's whistle, he gave the special signal which meant that he wanted help up the hill. Whistled Henry. "I need help, please," replied Duck. "I shan't be long." Duck buffeted gently up to Henry's train. He was not coupled on, so that Henry could run on without stopping when they reached the top. "Ready," Duck whistled. pull hard," puffed Henry. We're doing it," replied Duck. Henry was pulling harder than he thought. It was a dark night, and Duck felt the weight on his buffers slacken. Because of the dark, he could not see that Henry had taken the train on his own and was slowly drawing ahead. All trains carry a red lamp on the final vehicle to show that the train is complete. This is called a tail lamp. Duck's driver began to be worried. "There's no sign of a tail lamp," he said to the fireman. But we must keep going. Duck whistled, but there was no reply from Henry. Henry, meanwhile, was going well, but his train seemed to be getting heavier. He had to keep moving, but he could not avoid slowing down. Suddenly from behind, there came a splintering crash. Duck's front bent and pieces of broken wood began to fall on him, one of them denting his funnel. He stopped quickly, and Henry, feeling the jolt, stopped too, just beyond the top of the hill. Over Gordon's hill, a smell of fish hung in the air. By the light of torches, the drivers and firemen tried to work out what had happened, while the guard ran back down the hill to warn the signalman. When daylight came, it was all too obvious. The lamp iron on the old van which should have held the tail lamp had broken, and the lamp had fallen off at the bottom of the hill. "Not your fault, Duck," said the Fat Controller. "That lamp iron should have been checked. Don't worry, we'll soon have your funnel and front straightened out." "Thank you, sir," said Duck sadly. "Thomas told me once to be careful about fish. He was right, sir, wasn't he?" Gordon was resting in a siding. It was a hot day, and the express had been heavy. "I get so out of breath," he complained, "but nobody cares. They just say I'll be fine after a rest." "Get the Fat Controller to give you tanks in a bunker," suggested Thomas cheekily. "You'll feel a new engine. We tank engines never get out of breath, you know." Perhaps it was lucky for Thomas that poor Gordon hadn't the energy to reply. The men worked hard on Gordon, but they couldn't make him better. "You need new tubes, Gordon," they said. "You'll have to go to the works to have them fitted." While Gordon was being mended, Henry pulled the express. But one morning, just before Gordon was due back, Henry was ill too. "We've no spare engines except Thomas," the inspector told the Fat Controller, "but he can't pull the train on his own." "Could Percy help?" asked the Fat Controller. The inspector shook his head. "The two of them with Duck might manage," he suggested. "It's only as far as the works. They're sure to have a spare engine there." So the 3 tank engines were coupled together, Thomas nearest the train, Duck in the middle, and Percy at the front. Then, slowly, they started. Come on, fussed Percy importantly. We're doing it, puffed Duck. Pull harder, grumbled Thomas to the others. The heavy train drew out of the platform. The engines couldn't go as fast as Gordon, but the passengers didn't mind. They knew that Percy, Thomas and Duck were doing their best. Expresses are not like branch line trains. They don't stop at all the stations, and the engines don't have a chance to get their breath back. Soon the 3 began to feel tired. They struggled valiantly up Gordon's hill, but the strain was beginning to tell. I'm glad we didn't stick there, thought Thomas. Gordon would never let us hear the last of it. But the hill proved too much for Percy. His driver blew his whistle and stopped the train. "We can't take you off, Percy," said Thomas's driver. "Do the best you can to keep your brakes off. It's not far now." This made things harder for the other two, but they struggled gamely on, twin columns of steam shooting high into the air. "We're nearly there, we're nearly there," puffed Thomas and Duck together as they summoned a last brave effort. Poor Percy had no steam left to say anything. They were just passing the works when Duck found he could go no further. Thomas could not pull the heavy train on his own, and the cavalcade came to a standstill a few yards short of the station platform. And there, standing watching from the works siding, stood Gordon. The fat controller who had been on the train told the three engines he was proud of them. "You did very well to get this far," he said, "and now you deserve a rest." Duck, Percy and Thomas were uncoupled and a new engine took their place. As the tank engines moved wearily away, Gordon looked at Thomas and smiled. He then took 3 deep breaths and winked. He didn't need to say anything. Thomas knew exactly what he meant. Thank you.